Anyway, I do want I want to ask you a quick background of yourself again for folks that probably didn't. I'm sure there's a lot's gone on since between 2020 and now. But when I originally reached out to you, I was thinking we would continue the conversation on with sex robots and with AI, with how quickly artificial intelligence has progressed.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to, I think, this robotics progressing, those two things, I think of those as the physical body and then the brain. Those two things seem to be progressing exponentially. I was reaching out to you to have another conversation, maybe sex robots 2, episode 2, and I think in 4.5 years now, immense amount of change. But I think what you've been focusing on is more sex trafficking. You let me know there. So I am interested in wondering how you went from sex robots to sex trafficking. They seem obviously somewhat related, but I can see a lot of different perspectives that maybe they wouldn't overlap so much. But maybe a quick little background on yourself and catch the listeners up.
Okay, yeah, it's been a long time since I didn't realize it was 2020. So yeah, the biggest update is I'm not wearing a mask outside my office.
That's right.
When I go anywhere. But no, last time we talked, I was at Iowa State University. So I'm down in Texas now. So that's a big change. But I'm an assistant professor of sociology and criminology at McMurray University in Abilene, Texas. My research focus is on all issues of human sexuality. So I'm really spanning the scope of human sexuality. So that's why you have all these different topics. That's why you'll have, sex trafficking, sex robots, AI. Most of my work has dealt with the manner in which we construct our sexual selfhood. It's a little odd to throw sex trafficking into that mix because sex trafficking necessarily includes rape, and rape is not about sex. Rape is purely about power. So it's a little odd to add that to the mix, but it's in there, and that all came about. I was doing purely issues of sexuality, mostly from the standpoint of construction of sexual selfhood. And when I went into my Ph.D. program at Iowa State, the first class I took was a sex trafficking course. And first thing I was told was that sex trafficking happens everywhere. And even in the little town of Ames, Iowa, which is where Iowa State University is, it's a small town. Really, if the university wasn't there, there wouldn't be a town at all. And I'm like, no, that it doesn't happen in Ames, Iowa. No, not here. And I made that same mistake that so many other people make. And so that night, I went back to my place and I got onto some dark web areas of of the internet and found out within minutes that I could have had anything sent to my place that I wanted, including children. And it was all sex trafficking. And so that's when I first started to see that this happens everywhere. And it's readily available everywhere. And as I progressed with that course, I started to develop a reputation around that topic, and to the point where the Iowa Department of Justice came to me asking me to do a research study on trafficking. So one of the reasons I got the position I have in Texas is because of my work on sex trafficking. So when I got to Texas, suddenly I was this expert on sex trafficking. So now I'm getting requests day in and day out about, either lecturing on sex trafficking or doing this research project on sex trafficking. And that's the reason it's taken up so much of my time. And so eventually I need to back off and get back on to the other things that I want to do. But like you had said in an email to me yesterday, that you looked into it and you were angered and horrified, I think were your words. And now think about my position. I deal with this every day, day in and day out. And in my research, I'm traveling and doing research at ground zero where the sex trafficking is actually happening. I'm dealing with victims and survivors of sex trafficking on a daily basis. So yeah, it's very stressful. It's horrifying, and but we can't ignore it. If we ignore it, that's what the traffickers want. They want us
Mm.
to sweep it under the rug so that they can get on with their business
So what is
unencumbered.
your, in other words, where do you contribute to this I'll call it an epidemic, this horrific problem that we're all facing? Like, where do you contribute on trying to understand the minds of the traffickers? I mean, you're not in law enforcement, you're not trying to, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you participate? Like, how does your research contribute to solving this problem?
Well, I'm going in. Well, it's all about education.
Mm.
The reason that it expands exponentially is because people simply are not educated by it. I mean, consider the fact that I didn't believe that it happened everywhere. But I've talked to police officers, uh, lots of law enforcement politicians that they tell me, well, it doesn't happen here. I spoke with a chief of police last year who said not only does it not happen in the city he's in, it doesn't happen in the state he's in, it doesn't happen in the United States. That's something that happens, in foreign countries.
That
We
was a
we don't
police
have
chief's statement from a
That
police
was a
chief
police chief statement, and I've
in
heard the same thing from
2023, a year ago,
in
give or take.
2023. Yep,
That's
and I've
scary
heard
right there.
politicians say the same thing. The United States does not have a sex trafficking problem. That's in far distant foreign lands.
Mm.
That it's a myth, and so we need education. So I'm looking at the dynamics of sex trafficking. I'm reporting out my findings from whatever it is I find and run through a grounded theory analysis of the data that I accumulate.
Mm. And I would imagine just showing the data, because that's what I was, and I do want to run through a bunch of the numbers I gave you without being too much of I don't want to be reading spreadsheets here, but the stats are mind boggling.
Yeah.
And I try to fact check some of them, but I wanted to get your take on some of the numbers, but just before I do that, I mean the statement you made that these actual politicians and chiefs of police, which when I looked at some of the numbers, I said, oh gosh, I had no idea. But I'm also not in a position where I really, I mean, as a human, as a loving humans, fellow humans, I should kind of know about it. But me not being that smart on the data there is not, I don't think is a huge problem. But someone in a position of power and law enforcement not thinking it's even,
Hmm.
not even acknowledging, oh, it's a problem, but and not knowing maybe the breadth of the problem, but seeming to think it wasn't a problem at all. That's just that
Hmm.
in of itself is disturbing. It reminds me of that
Yeah.
quote, like the devil's big, what is it? The devil's most significant accomplishment is convincing the world he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That
That's
whole,
exactly what it is.
and that's just resonated when you said that in my head. And man, that's scary.
That's that's what sex traffickers want. They
Mm.
want us to think that it doesn't exist, that it doesn't happen here, because then they can work at will.
Yeah, yeah. If you don't, I mean, yeah. If no one thinks you exist, then that's the best possible situation, right?
Right.
You're not gonna get massive amounts of funding against you if no one really thinks the problem exists, right? Um,
Right. And I mean,
it's crazy.
and the thing is, I know you have lots of numbers, but I mean, one of the big numbers that I always put forth is that this is a $150 billion, billion with a B,
Mm.
$1 billion industry worldwide. Out of that $150 billion, 99 billion, so vast majority of the pie, is sex trafficking alone. And we're estimating 21 million victims of human trafficking globally. But we also have considered the idea that we may only know about 5% of the problem. So if you're considering a $150 billion industry with 21 million victims globally, that very well could only be 5%. Now do the numbers.
So those numbers you articulated are off or not accounting for the actual 95%, which is the
Potentially.
nine, which
Yeah.
is most, yeah.
We're only making estimates because we do not know the extent of the problem.
Well, I guess, I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense that it's hard to find ground truth there because I mean, anything black market, it's hard to quantify because by nature they don't want to be detected. And
Right.
but is there? So you said 99 of it's $150 billion industry. I thought that was generally sex trafficking itself. You said
That
99
includes labor
billion.
trafficking.
Oh, okay. So trafficking humans in which the objective is not sex but forced labor, slavery.
Yep. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. 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 Wow. Wow. And globally versus, I mean, because the 150 number you read off, that was one of my numbers. So obviously, sounds like you concur with that number, which is,
Yes.
I mean, mind-boggling. The other ones, every 30 seconds, a child is trafficked. 40 million victims worldwide. I mean, 1 in 7 runaways are trafficked. 99% are women and girls. I mean, you can go on and on and on. It's just, one of the numbers that actually scared me the most is 80%. And I'd like to get your take on this. 80% of victims are never rescued.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, so if you just do the numbers, I mean, it's just, so they've gone
You're gonna have
forever.
to do the math there.
I
I'm
mean,
not gonna do the math.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's mind boggling. It really is. Now, is
It
there
is.
ratio between, like, to go back to that, the chief of police perspective, we tend to have this
Mhm.
myopic view sometimes in the States where, oh, that's not here. Right.
Yeah.
What is that, of some of these numbers, percentage wise, US versus globally? Is the US just a small piece of it, or are we, are we leading the
No,
pack?
we're not leading. I don't know if we're leading the pack, but we're definitely a major contributor.
We're in the game. Yeah.
And it does originate here. But we also have forces coming in from outside. Uh, for instance, we have some of it coming up through the southern border, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not just Mexico. It comes in through Canada. They'll
Mm-hmm.
bring in victims through Canada. That's why Iowa. One of the things that surprised me was Iowa's really one of a ground zero for trafficking, and the reason for that, you wouldn't think
Really?
Iowa,
Right.
but here's the reason. They're coming up through Mexico, they're coming down through Canada, they're meeting in the middle.
Mm.
Iowa is a small state, which is square. So if a trafficker needs to get over a border quickly, it's connected north, south, east, west by a major highway system.
Mm.
They can get over the border quickly, or there's a lot of rural area in Iowa that they can hide out in.
Right. And like anything, I mean, and I don't think there's even any exceptions to this. I don't think I've seen it, but money is always the ultimate incentive. Like,
Yeah,
that's right at the end of the
yeah.
day. So if we just take the one sliver of this population, it's, and let me know if you disagree, but is it in your research mostly women, girls in
Yeah.
the 10, 11, 12, 13, like that age bracket, young
Well,
teen or
well,
older?
okay. It is disproportionately women and girls, but we cannot ignore the fact that men are sex trafficked as well.
Mm.
Yes, disproportionately it's women and girls, but we cannot forget that men are there as well. Now, as far as age group goes, it really spans the age range because, as I have found, that elderly women are trafficked, children are trafficked, babies are trafficked. I have evidence of babies as young as 3 months being
Mm.
sex trafficked. One of the things that one of the populations
Baby's
that
3
traffic.
months old for
Yes, sir.
sexual.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
So there is one of the
Wow.
populations that traffickers um, pursue is pregnant women.
Hmm.
They love when they can get pregnant women as victims because traffickers see that as a two for one.
Twofer. I was just going. Yeah.
Yes. So when she gives birth, then they have two victims.
I mean, you got to give them credit. It's efficient. I mean, if just, I hate to use that word, but if you're
Yeah.
going to be a horrific human, and you
Yeah.
have an objective, that's a way to reach your cause quicker. You double it,
Hmm.
frankly.
Yeah.
It's insane. Wow.
So it's not just young women. We have to look at everything. We cannot ignore anyone because if you ignore that babies are being trafficked or if you ignore that elderly women are being trafficked, then you're not considering that person. If you see something that's potentially trafficking and you say, well, that's an 85-year-old woman. Obviously, that's not a trafficking incident.
Yeah,
Then you're
right,
going to
right, right.
ignore it.
Mm, mm.
So,
And
and it's
I mean, is it, again, just not to get too graphic, but I mean, the 3-month-old, you just confirmed that that is potentially for sex.
yes,
Horrific. 85-year-old woman too. The same thing. I mean,
same
these are
thing. Yeah.
just men out there. I would assume
Yep.
mostly men on the on the as the perpetrator side, because that's the male
Quite
sex
often.
drive has no bounds typically.
Not always. Not
Not
always.
always,
I
but
mean,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Obviously, there's exceptions to a lot of this, but just to have the general
Yeah.
conversation. I mean, um, wow, yeah. Now, I do want to, later we'll talk about ways to, like, common threads, common themes through which a person becomes more vulnerable, right? You know,
Hmm.
and I know for a fact it's not going to be that, oh, it's just the folks in poverty or in, down and out desperate areas, maybe, not, they don't have the typical 2-family home. I know it could probably happen across the board in the most,
Yeah.
whatever, white collar, prosperous type neighborhood. I'm sure it can happen there as well. But our
Yeah.
I want to imagine there's themes to, because when you're doing the, doing the research, and I started looking for examples, and I think I said this in my email to you. It I was thinking I'd find select examples here and there, and it was just examples, every day almost, in every year, in every part of the world. That just, there was no shortage of examples. So I actually stopped writing examples down to send you, because I said, well, this is not even worth it. The examples are pretty much everywhere every day. So it confirms some of the numbers. But I guess a theme I did see was, well, the kids, just pick that, group, for example. Being more vulnerable is obviously a really good start if you're a trafficker, right?
Hmm.
Having low
Hmm.
self-esteem, not having that confidence in your worth, and maybe, and I would imagine that that would start at the home. And again, I think there's exceptions where a well-meaning mom, dad, whatever the family situation is, could absolutely still happen. But I would imagine that is a common theme where you have, the examples. One of the examples I saw was, they had a relatively young, good-looking boy, maybe 15, 18, right? In the same, they targeted a girl at the mall, and I don't exactly remember where this was. Um, the traffickers had one of the kids that was working for them, but it was a young, good-looking kid, blonde hair, blue eyes, and went up to one of the girls, which was their target, and just started complimenting her.
Hmm.
And, right, like, hey, you're really pretty, and just, just any girl would want in a mall that age. A young, good-looking guy comes up to her, and, and they basically were recording her, and their view was, if she looks down at her shoes and gets uncomfortable and starts kind of sort of blushing, then they got her, because she's not used to hearing compliments too often. She's got a low self-esteem, and they just, I mean, they're basically psychologists. They understand how in a sense. But they would vector away from someone who responded confidently and looked the kid in the eye and said, get out of here. Come on. Who are you? What school you go to? And they just interacted more in a confident way. So they really do target that low self-esteem, that person's looking for accolades, looking for some self-worth. Would you agree with that kind of, again, general swath? There's probably a ton of exceptions,
Yeah.
but that's I would imagine, a huge
Sure.
target.
So they do prey upon vulnerabilities, but what's important to know is that anyone can be trafficked.
Mm.
Absolutely anyone can be trafficked, but also it's important to note that anyone can be a trafficker. So it's not just the person in the alley, dimly lit with the trench
Yeah.
coat. So it can be a politician. It can be judge on the
Yeah.
bench of a court. It can be a high-ranking doctor or academic. Anyone can be a trafficker. 50% of traffickers are women now, so it's not just men that are traffickers.
Really?
And see, that's why education is important around this, because you're not going to recognize when trafficking is happening if you don't understand all the dynamics of trafficking. That's why I'm asked to do so many
Yeah.
lectures on this around there. But like, let's take a college campus. So we have this concept called the red zone that has nothing to do with football. The red zone is the period of time between the beginning of fall semester to Thanksgiving break. So we're just about to end the red zone
Mm.
period right now. on college campuses. This is the period when most sexual assaults occur on college campuses, because you have freshman women coming onto campus who are, they don't know the system. They don't, maybe they don't know anybody.
Trying to
Um,
find their
they
place.
don't know how
Yeah.
things work. They're trying to find their place, and this sets up a vulnerability for people to prey upon.
Mm.
Uh, and they do. They absolutely do. And that includes traffickers. Traffickers groom their victims. And so, that's happening during this period of the red zone, but it's grooming. That's another thing that's important to note. It's grooming. This whole idea that you see in Hollywood of the car coming up and grabbing you off the street, or the movie Taken,
Mm.
just breaking into the hotel room and grabbing someone. That happens so rarely we don't even look at it.
Mm.
It's grooming. So when you see movies like Taken, that is not the way it happens. If you see movies like the Sound of Freedom, that is not the way it happens. That is fiction. So, and if you
Mm.
if you watch a movie like Taken and you say, well, that's how trafficking happens, and then you actually see trafficking going, well, that's not what it's like in Taken, therefore that's not trafficking, so I don't have to report that. So it does these movies do a great disservice
Mm. Because
to the education.
grooming is just not exciting, because it takes slow, methodical,
Yep.
just brainwashing, and Hollywood has to come out of the gate and kick the door and have explosion and have Liam Neeson have that awesome quote, whatever he had said in Taken, right? I have a
A
special set of
six,
skills. Yeah,
You're right, right. It's
I
more
mean
exciting
that's
that way, rather
yeah.
than a 6-hour film of someone going, "Hey, let's go get a cup of
Yeah,
coffee and
yeah, and
talk." Because
you'd enjoy it. I'd enjoy it, and you'd watch the malleable psychological breakdown of the person over 12 hours. But yeah, there'd be 7 people in the audience. It's just no one has time for it.
but if there's someone out there that wants to produce that movie, I will make that movie.
Well, I mean, there's certainly a market for it. It's just
Yeah,
it's not wide enough, I guess. But
yeah.
yeah. Well, that I'm getting an education as we're talking, because I did have a bunch of preconceived notions, and certainly
So did
realizing
I.
certainly realizing that there's going to be exceptions to all of it. But I think what I'm getting from you is the things, the profiles of these folks, whether they're on the victim side or the victimizer side. The
Hmm.
profiles are a lot more uh, a lot less specific than I thought, I guess. What I would think was typically more of an exception, I think it's more common. It's less of an exception. Like 50, you said 50% traffickers are now women.
Yeah,
I would never have guessed that. Never,
yeah.
ever,
So,
ever.
and right now I'm putting the finishing touches on a book that's looking at sex trafficking specifically in the adult film industry,
Mm.
and looking at how all these dynamics play out in the adult film industry, and it's mind-boggling,
I imagine
the
that's
whole
pretty
process of that.
prolific in the.
It's very prolific, but what's important to note is that not everyone in the adult film industry, or not everyone in sex work, has been trafficked, and that's another
Yeah,
one of those myths that are out there. There's a lot of people. I mean, people get into sex work for a variety of reasons.
yeah,
And there's a lot of people in the adult film industry. There's a lot of people who do sex work that's what they want to do. They're not being coerced,
right.
manipulated into doing it. They're there because they want to do it. So, like with the adult film industry, out of the hundreds of people I've interviewed that are in the industry, um, very few of them were actually trafficked at some point, but almost all of them know a trafficking incident that has happened in the industry.
Right.
So someone else, I've heard this story, or I knew this person, and this is what happened to this person. So
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, let's be honest, right? If you're in that industry, you're flying pretty close to the sun of that. You're in a different world a little bit, and like I
yeah,
agree with this. Probably folks that are, hey, I'm adults, I'm making decisions, and they actually might have amazing self esteem. They're just choosing to do that work because for a variety of reasons. To your point, but
right.
but you're
But if
you're
you look
you're,
at
you're flying close to the sun there. I think a little
right,
bit
well, if
for.
you even look at Pornhub, um, received constant, uh, complaints about, hey, there's a video of me on there, a clip that that was not a consensual act.
Mm,
needs to be taken down. So anyway, a few years ago, Pornhub said, okay, we're going to take down everything where we cannot show consent. You know, so anything that might be revenge porn or anything that might be a trafficking incident, potentially trafficking incident, or just a non-consensual situation. They had 13.5 million clips up. They went down to 3.5 million clips. 10 million clips were taken down where consent could not be guaranteed.
Doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't, but they just could not guarantee the consent.
Right. And of course, they all went right back up under different headings and different.
Yeah, right. Now, I did see I guess while you're on that topic, I forgot who was it. I think it was I forgot who the podcast was, but they had the Pornhub folks on, and they're asking that direct question. And the interview was a little bit. They were put in the hot seat. Pornhub, the executives at Pornhub were put in the hot seat, and I guess I'd have to rewatch it, but the impression I got, and I don't know if you would certainly know better, but they were it was Patrick Bet David, Valuetainment. I do follow his podcast quite a bit. I like some of the stuff he does, but he was coming at them pretty hard and not letting them off easy. But they came across as they truly have a lot of gates in place to ensure that they're not getting minors. They're they are confirming consent, to your point. I think they did a good job of conveying that they're very strict on that to ensure that it's consenting adults only. And, but there was some areas that, I think they couldn't quite, and I guess you can't guarantee anything. This is a digital world. So there's ways to come around everything. I mean, do you feel like, say, Pornhub, for example, did they do everything they can to ensure, legitimate consent?
I don't know. I'd have to dig far more.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm not sure if you had any specific research there, but, I don't know that whole thing.
I think we can always do more.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But it didn't come across that they were allowing, specific wide open loopholes for some sort of profit, or it didn't seem like that. Now the folks that they had on were probably the best in their executive staff to defend that position. So I'm sure that I was hearing the A players defend that, but they came across with I guess general sincerity that they're doing the best they can to protect minors and protect non-consensual. So I mean, but that whole, again, like I said, that whole world is that you're flying kind of close to the sun there. I don't know, it's a little odd to me. But you mentioned the Sound of Freedom, so that it's funny. I do want to get your take on this because this it's so funny.
I wish I hadn't. That has been the thorn in the side of anyone that works with sex trafficking.
Okay, because so my wife and I just quit. It's something that I would say twice a year something comes up where we hear a stat, or from our church they have they have some group that's trying to learn join some organization or foundation to help with sex trafficking. And it always hits us right in the heart. It just obviously because the same reason you're into it. You can't really, it's crazy when you start hearing some of this stuff, but the Sound of Freedom keeps coming up as, you got to see it. And as I was preparing for this podcast, I told my wife, we got to watch Sound of Freedom. I know we haven't watched it yet, and we've been saying it for probably over a year now. And I said, we'll probably talk about something like that. I didn't have it in my notes, but you mentioned it. Someone asked, so is it crap? Correct.
What do you mean?
I guess is the
filmmaking.
Well, forget the production value and all that, but it doesn't represent how the reality of most trafficking. It sounds like.
Okay, so, and spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it, but I don't care if I spoil it.
It's been out for a while, right? Yeah. Mostly me, because I haven't seen it yet.
There's an opening sequence that shows the cars driving up and just snatching girls off the street. All right, that's doing a huge disservice to how trafficking is actually happening. The actual person, Allard, who's filmed, he said that he's not the hero that the film has made him out to be. He didn't actually do all that stuff. He wasn't running through the jungle with children strapped. He didn't go in alone and run through the jungle with children strapped to his body. He said that didn't happen. So we know that the movie's, based on a story, but it's Hollywoodized and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And
Yeah.
now there's people involved with the movie, and you can look it up, that are being accused of sexual abuse of victims. So
Mm. Oh boy.
yeah, I don't even want to go into that. That
Well,
gets me
damn it,
more
David,
angry than anything. So
you
you
ruined
can
my
look it up. You
my
can look
movie
it up
night
on
with my
your own.
wife, but no.
All right. Well, go see Wicked.
Uh, what is it?
Go see Wicked.
Wicked?
Yeah,
Wicked. Is that the wait, the
that's the Broadway show
Oh yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, I've seen that God years ago in New York. I saw that. I think I saw that
Yeah,
wait,
yeah.
literally
The
like
the the
15
film
years ago. Yeah. How
the
did you
film
make the
opened
jump from
yesterday,
Sound
so
of Freedom to Wicked?
just go see something
Oh,
else.
okay. That was
All
a
right.
weird.
Yes, I am not saying that Munchkins were sex trafficked in this film. It's
Yeah, I'm like, what is he going with there? All right. Anyway.
Yeah. Just go see something else. Yeah.
Oh,
Don't watch Taken. Don't
yeah.
watch Sound of Freedom.
Well, no, but your point
Let's
is,
get a movie out there that's real.
but your point's well taken because I know we said it right, but it's worth repeating. When you have Hollywood, which is where a lot of people get their reality, unfortunately, right? They just do. They just assume, even if it's not, and it might be just an indirect way we assume how things happen. Well, I've seen 7 movies on it, so it must be sort of
Yeah.
like that. But you're right.
Yeah.
We'll all be looking for signs that predominantly won't exist. If
Yeah.
we're looking for that Hollywoodized type situation where sex trafficking is actually occurring. So I
And
think it's
that's why I
worth
say it's a disservice,
yeah, absolutely.
because then it's not educating people to recognize it when it's actually happening in front of them.
Mm.
And if they are not recognizing it, they can't report it.
So on
And if
that,
they
what?
don't report it, it perpetuates.
Yep, yep. So, well, I guess on that note, what are folks listening? We're in airports, we're in hotels, we're in
Mhm.
Ubers. Like what should we be looking for? What are the signs that actually are real?
Well, there are some. I mean, first of all,
Probably
and I
hard.
tell this to everyone: if something seems um, wrong, report it. You know, just, and yes, there's all kinds of hotlines you can call, but unless you have those in your phone, you're not going to look them up. Just
Yeah.
now dial 911. Let the authorities handle it. If there's nothing wrong, that's fine.
Hmm.
But if something is wrong and you don't report it, then you have allowed someone to be victimized another day.
Yeah.
So things to look for is someone not being allowed to speak for themselves?
Mm.
Is traffickers tend to stay within very close proximity, if not right next to their victims? Um, and the average person's not going to know this, but I mean, there's sometimes identifiable tattoos, because traffickers will sometimes literally brand their victims so that other traffickers don't
Mm.
pursue them. Um, uh, is someone being kept away from interactions in public? Is someone being kept inside a house and you just never ever see them? And when you do try to contact them, there's somebody that steps in the way.
Mm.
There's lots of little things, but the thing is, if you suspect something, you know, we got this with the airports. If you see something, say something.
Yeah.
That goes with trafficking as well. I mean, places, strip malls. You see the sketchy places that don't really have a name to them, and the windows are blacked out, and it just says massage.
Mm.
Stuff like that. Those are places that there are often fronts.
Hmm.
But we see the high levels of trafficking at places like sporting events, and tailgating. The bigger the sporting event, the more trafficking is going on. For instance, like Super Bowls. When the Super Bowl was in Minneapolis uh, this last time, there were sex trafficking rings that were broken up during that.
So walk me through that. Physically, I'm at the Super Bowl, and when
Mhm.
you say how does this come together? Is there like
Well, they're
what is
looking for
occurring?
buyers. Yeah, they're
Oh,
they're
oh,
they're looking for buyers. Yeah,
oh, gotcha. Okay, so these are
you'll be approached by,
traffickers.
yeah.
Okay, that actually have a young or a person that's being
A
trafficked,
person.
and they're looking for
Yeah,
another trafficker to be the buyer. Okay, okay,
they're
got it.
they're looking for a buyer.
Hmm.
Yeah, quite often. But
Hmm.
no, it's just. if something seems, I mean, be on the lookout. But if something seems strange,
Yeah.
there was a police officer I talked to that he had pulled over um, a car for, I think it was speeding, and the car was packed with, I mean, everyone was kind of almost sitting on each other's laps. There were so many people in the car, and it was all women. And there was one guy who was doing the driving, and the officer was asking questions of the women, and he would not allow them to answer. He answered for them, and it was later discovered that this was a person that was trafficking.
Mm.
Well, he just wrote a ticket and let them go because he was not trained in
Mm.
identifying trafficking. So those women in that car were continue to be victimized because the officer did not recognize it,
Mm.
that they were being trafficked.
Can you imagine what's going on in their heads, where they're
Yeah,
sitting there 3 feet from their potential savior,
yeah,
and
yep,
that's just that's heartbreaking. That mindset, that this is someone's daughter out there, or perhaps someone's
yeah,
granddaughter that is just, and they're in the back of a car, and
yeah.
their captor's driving, and their savior is 3 feet away, and they can't say anything, and then they drive away. That heart
And they drive
wrenching,
away.
yeah, that
Yeah. And to think about that officer later on
yeah,
discovering
right.
something like that.
That's a
It's
good
like,
point
I
too.
mean, I could have saved them that day.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you didn't let me miss that. I'm sure that officer's going feels horrific. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a. I've had this discussion with my wife before. In public places, we see something that's off, and it's like, oh, the kid's screaming, or the kid looks like they're in the. You don't want to be. There is a balance, right? You don't, because you don't want to be that person that's always just, your red flag, your radar's so up, and you see anything that's off, you want to go and just interject between a potential parent and just a misbehaving child,
Right.
or there's that kind of balance. But yeah, it is hard. But the last thing you want is to have missed something like that, and then hear,
We'll put that in the frame of the airport too.
yeah,
The see something or see something, say something. I mean, yeah, there's a balance there too. You know,
mm,
that person looks sketchy, and how many people actually report that?
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, no, right. Well, nowadays too, everyone's afraid of being accused of just profiling someone, or but
There's
so
that
so
too.
so there's that too, right? But oh man,
But
so
we have
yeah,
to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere.
yeah. But it sounds like your main, everything you're doing is really sharing. I mean, this awareness, frankly, is that, I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately is sharing awareness, dispelling the myths, just education,
Understanding the
education, education.
dynamics, the
Yeah.
spelling, yeah, education, just reporting on what I'm finding with the dynamics of sex trafficking.
Hmm. Now, is
But we
there,
were talking about movies, the movies that come out in this. I mean, last time you and I met, uh, we were talking about the same thing with myths and what life's going to be like around all this stuff. We were talking about Blade Runner 2049,
Oh,
and
right,
putting
right,
that
right, right.
into sex robots and
Hmm.
AI and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
it's that seduction of the Hollywoodization of
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah. 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 That escapism Hollywood gives you, there's another side to it.
Hmm.
It's just cast this kind of, irrational, this lack of reality. Um, are we are we is this problem just growing? Are we making, I say the good guys, are the good guys catching up? Is it nowhere near where it needs to be? It sounds like it's the latter. It doesn't seem like it's quite as recognized as the pervasive issue that it actually is.
Nowhere near where it needs to be. Not even close.
Hmm. Are there
I
incentives?
mean,
Not. I mean,
I've,
what's
I
the
mean, I spent last summer at ground zero of a lot of these places where trafficking was taking place, and it was evident that it's so out of control. And
ground zero? Where's that?
I won't. Well, I went to several places where trafficking was actually
Okay.
taking place, and um, they're in the book. But
in this country
It's
or
just
other countries?
in this country.
In this
No, it was
country.
in this country,
Mm.
and it was going on all around me.
Hmm.
Um, I had to make several reports. There's one incident where there was an individual who did not want me in that environment. He knew what I was doing. He did not want me there. It was blatantly obvious he did not want me there. And after I'd left, 2 days later, um, I received an anonymous text, obviously through a burner phone, um, or a burner account, but it was simply a picture of his gun.
Mm.
Uh, so I asked some people around time, and they're like,
Mm. Okay. Well, that's a nice way to keep you from doing that again, perhaps, or at least
I'm
dissuade you
actually
from.
I'm actually about to go back to that same area, so we'll see what happens.
Well, good for you. I mean, yeah. Well, I guess that's the problem. That's one of the problems, right? That intimidation tactic works for many people.
Yeah,
No one wants to get shot, and he basically sent a message to you saying, "Hey, stay away."
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
I guess without maybe you can't give me too many details, but you were there under what pretense? Like an
As a
investigative
researcher,
reporter, or okay?
no, I mean I can't. I mean, just through IRB regulations, I can't falsify what I'm doing.
Mm,
When I talk to research participants, so they know why I'm there. I'm there to talk about, in this case with the adult film industry. I'm there to talk to them about their experiences in the adult film industry.
hmm
So they know that. They have to know that because I have to, they have an informed consent form that they sign, that I sign, that explains to them the nature of the research project and their rights as a research participant. And part of that is disclosure.
mm. Oh, gotcha. So you're in that environment. It more so was the and if you can just say I can't say, but so you're in this environment where
Mhm.
the research is on the adult industry, not necessarily trafficking, or both.
The no, well, it's framed in experiences of women in the adult film industry,
Mm-hmm.
and trafficking is
Part of
is
that.
a part of that.
Okay, and then this gentleman or the folks that were starting to realize maybe you were asking questions that were getting too close to home. You started
Yes,
realizing, okay, they you must have crossed some line where they said, I don't want this guy here.
I absolutely crossed the line.
Mm,
Yes.
okay.
So I'm not saying this person is a trafficker. I do not know that this person is a trafficker. Um, if you were to ask me to place my bets, I
Yeah.
would say, yeah, that he's a trafficker. Yes.
Well, we know he's a guy that would send you a picture of a gun and doesn't know you. So
He is
that's,
a person, the kind of person that obviously I crossed the line and
yeah.
just nope. There was no, you know, there was no text. It was just a photo of his gun.
Well, you're going back. Well, good for you. And I think, parents and
So we will
goes on
hold
the good
today
side
as
of you.
my final interview, and
Yeah, I was gonna. I want to make that joke, but I was thinking that I'm like, well, so I better publish this quickly. Um, wow. Wow. So okay. Well, going back with your email, you kind of, I was getting I was getting the impression that this has been all consuming for you based on some of the conversations over email we were having. And
quite a bit.
I kind of see how I almost don't know how it couldn't be, right? I mean,
Yeah,
this is wow. So well, what can folks like me and others that and again, I'm asking almost personally. Like I said, my wife and I
yeah.
have had this conversation even as recent as like a couple of days ago. Are there what is the best way someone could help? Is it starting a foundation? Is it joining a movement? I say talking about it like this, information sharing is certainly helpful, but at some point go do something. Is it donating to some cause, hoping your money doesn't get wasted on operations costs, or like what do you recommend?
Get educated. Get educated. There's a lot of great places. Every every state has some sort of an organization with human trafficking. We have a lot of them in Texas. Uh, RVCC, uh, Big Country Human Trafficking Coalition. But find places in your state, in your area, go to workshops, attend webinars. If you have an institution that brings in guest speakers,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm constantly asked to speak on this, and I'll go anywhere. If you want me to come talk to your organization, email me. I'll be there.
That's
I
a
have
good point.
never turned anyone down. So I've gone to everything from universities to speak about this to small community churches that'll have me in to do it. So I am more than happy to do it. But there's there's a lot of people out there doing the work that will be happy to help educate and bring awareness around these issues. And yes, this has taken up so much of my time since I've moved to Texas, but I'm also um, I also find time to do research in my other uh, areas of human sexuality, and I just had another paper published that had nothing to do with sex trafficking, and that thrilled me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Like a little bit of a
I
relief.
am
Yeah.
doing,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, I'm still finding time to do that stuff too. And you and I talked about the whole AI thing, and I want to do a much larger project on AI and sexuality. I'm gearing up to do that,
Mm.
and kind of dipping my toes in the water right now to see how exactly I want to pursue that and in what ways. And it does come a bit off of what we had talked about before with sex robots.
Right.
Less the physical aspect of the sex robot, more so the AI aspects of a sex robot, or just an AI program that you'll find now, the virtual AI boyfriend girlfriend.
Right.
That
Right.
there's lots of companies popping up now that have that. Uh, so doing something like that, but mostly just this trying to understand the dynamics of the human experience and what people are looking for to benefit their human experience through the use of AI boyfriends or
Mm.
girlfriends, what they need, why they need that, what they're expecting from it, and at what point does it meet their expectations?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It almost sounds like that's so much more. That last 30 seconds we talked so much more positive and just like, although I have concerns with AI and integrating, artificial intelligence into our relationship circles, but I do think it's inevitable. I think you probably agree,
Well,
but
there's the question, if you want to keep dark, there's the question of should sex robots be created that resemble children? Because, all right, so are we
to keep the
saying
pedophiles focused on them.
satisfied? Right. Now the question is, will that keep a pedophile satisfied, or will that just kind of enhance their confidence to move toward the real thing? And
I go on record saying we don't do that.
well,
I
most
mean,
people are on the record.
yeah.
Yeah, most people are saying that needs to be laws need to be put into place,
Mm.
that manufacturers are not making sex robots that resemble children.
Yeah, yeah. I understand the perspective because it could perhaps save some actual children. I get that, but you're just normalizing. I mean, no matter how you're enabling in normalizing a behavior.
Um,
So it's hard when I get it. It's the same. Should you give out condoms in high schools? Right, same sort of
yeah,
kind of maybe. Same lane, if you will.
yeah. It's a definite slippery slope
Mm.
consideration, and potentially a very dangerous one.
What's wrong with us humans? Come on, David, fix us, would you? Come on, what's going
How okay? How long is this podcast?
on? we got.
Let's finish it here. Let's definitively solve it here. This will be your
This is it.
highest.
Let's do it. Yep,
You can even advertise it as we figured it
we
out.
figured it out. Capital IT. Oh my gosh. No, well, look, I appreciate. I'm grateful that you're doing the work you are. Truly, and I think anyone listening
I
would probably
appreciate that.
agree. I mean, it's. I'm sure it. Yeah, I'm sure it messes with your psyche. You going down these rabbit holes, or folks that are doing the work you do, right? There's some PTSD that comes along with it. I'm sure I'm not saying that you don't know, but extra gratitude towards what you're putting yourself through. I don't know
I
if you
have
have
hard days.
kids or
I
do you
have
have
hard
kids or
days.
family? I don't even know.
I do.
You do.
Yeah.
So even more so.
But
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. No, I have hard days. There's days where, I just want to sit in a darkened room and
mm,
not deal with the world, but I can't. I don't have that luxury.
yeah, sitting back and doing nothing is not it's what most of us get to do because we have folks like you that aren't doing it. So again, thank you.
Mm, I appreciate
Gosh,
that.
gosh. Well, let's wrap this up, David, because I've really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate, I know it took a while to get us kind of locked in here schedule wise, but so you mentioned a couple things you have going on, books, projects
Mhm.
going on. What do you got coming out that maybe folks can look out for?
Oh, I have a new article on sexual development coming out. I think it's in a few months in the Journal of Sexualities. I'm working on two books. One is in collaboration with Dr. Dennis Waskell on sex and society. And then hopefully soon I'll finally say I'm done. I'm done editing the massive volume on sex trafficking in the adult film industry. That'll be coming up. But again, if there's anyone that wants to talk to me about this, that wants to have me come in and talk to their group, um, by all means, contact me, and I will definitely be there.
What's the best way they should reach out?
Email. Email is always best.
Okay.
It's Wahl, Wahl David at mcm.edu.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes, right? Okay.
Sure.
Yep.
That's the best way to contact me.
Okay.
Um,
Well, awesome.
yeah.
Well,
So we
David.
have to talk sometime about AI.
Well, okay, that was my last thing. AI, it's been fascinating to me. You probably know
Yeah.
I've been in software my whole life, so seeing the AI exploding it's been exciting. I have some days I'm in this kind of existential fear crisis. What's going to happen next, kind of thing, and then other days I'm like, it's just going to help us with a lot of stuff. We'll be fine. So I go back and forth. But it is getting. I would say the area that you're in probably concerns me the most in that when you start replacing other humans with these, with these intelligence, quote unquote, right? I think it is going to solve some, it's going to hit the mark for a lot of people that are missing something. Or maybe they're not missing anything and they just want to supplement what they're getting from there, right? And maybe I'm just thinking just too old school. It's great. You know what I mean? Like I'm just trying to navigate in my head. I think most of us are, but it's fascinating. And, so what I will do is I'll keep bugging you over the next, several months. If we can
Yeah.
get another one on the books that's strictly on AI,
Do it.
let's do it.
Yeah.
So
That'd
anyway,
be
David,
great. I'd appreciate that.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You enjoy your weekend, and I'll let you know when this publishes. So,
Okay.
thank you so
Have a
much.
happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you as well. You as well.